Welcome to the latest Tecman Talks Dynamics, and exciting one, this one, because we're looking at the Wave 1 2022 release notes, specifically for Business Central, but it's nice to see a nice long list from Microsoft again.
Okay, so should we start with the application list then? I'll drive, I'll go through the list and we can pick out some of the highlights. Jobs has had some changes. You can now have build to, sell to on the job, which is
long overdue.
Yeah, it's more in line with the rest of the system, really.
Yeah, and then you can also use inventory picks and warehouse picks now from jobs, which, you know, some people are having to go back to sales orders and raise sales orders for those. You can do that directly from the jobs now as well.
Jobs has had quite a lot of love over a few releases now, hasn't it? It
has.
seems
It's
to be
gradually building, and
yeah.
I think if you've looked at it before and discounted it, it's worth another look.
Yeah.
I wish they called it projects rather than jobs. I think jobs as a term perhaps puts people off. Yeah, it's more construction industry base maybe, but actually there's a lot of kind of project orientated organisations that could use it.
Yeah.
We use it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Next one, the amount of times we've done this, I'd hate to say, but specifying a currency, as in a bank account details based around the currency.
Yeah, so basically, so you can have a different, if it's a Euro customer, they have the Euros bank account details, dollars bank account.
So please pay this Euro invoice into our Euro account rather than our Sterling one or whatever.
Yeah, which is far better.
It's logical.
What I've seen before as well is people have them all printed on the document, so you've got lots of bank details.
And then they pay them into the wrong one anyway, and then you get loads of bank charges. Yeah.
So that's a good feature to add, and something that we've done bespoke previously quite a lot of times.
On the service documents as well, so not just sales.
Yeah.
Contras, yes, being able to do one-line contra between customers and suppliers.
Yeah, and also being able to view, so your customer and vendor are linked together, and you can see the customer balance on the vendor card and the vendor balance on the customer card. Yeah. So when you're potentially, if you were using it for things like credit checks, you can see how much they owe you and you owe them. Yeah. So that's
it's a nice one.
Yeah, I like that. That's something that, again, I've done bespoke a few times over the years.
Isn't actually difficult to do, and arguably should have been done years ago. Controversially, can I say? But it's just great to see Microsoft ticking these easy wins off.
Yeah. Production bombs can now have a fixed quantity. It comes up sometimes. Startup scrap. There's a common scenario where you've got an extrusion machine where there's always going to be 20 kilos worth of material that has to go through before you can even start getting any product. So useful one there. Exchange rates, enhancements.
That just gives you a little bit more control over the batch job, because previously it was a big job that posts loads of entries that can get really confusing. So, and I've seen people trying to do that manually to avoid using that batch job, but actually I think that's sorted now, and that's much easier to use.
Mm-hmm. Deferral postings, one of James's.
Well, I always thought right from deferrals day one, the fact that the posting date restrictions were applied to deferrals meant you couldn't defer for very long at all if you were using your posting dates properly. So the fact that the deferral element of the posting doesn't have the posting dates applied, it means you can defer for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever you need to do.
Variants came into forecasts, I think, in Wave 2 of 2021, but now they're going to enhance it to make it easier to use. So some kind of UI improvements there, which is a nice one. Jobs, again, talked about. They call it projects here. Bit of
interesting.
Maybe there's a name change coming. Report selection, so you can choose the report for some of those job reports rather than it just being fixed as it is out the box.
Default dimensions on locations, that's a long...
Done that a few times?
Yeah, a long time coming, so just
specify some locations on your
enter.
Some dimensions on your locations, that's useful. Quite a big one, I think, Shopify connector. And it's Shopify being an e-commerce solution. Microsoft and Shopify made this announcement a few months ago. Looking at the description of it, it's more than, it's not just orders, it's
how far does it
items,
go?
Pricing, history, so order history, stock availability.
I was about to say, does it cover stock availability? Because that's
I don't know what
one
control.
of the big
Yeah.
One of the head scratchers always when we do integration with websites is how you calculate that availability and how you make sure that if as somebody entering an order in the back office gets the same result as maybe somebody putting on a website, and then not
typically they're updating the inventory kind of once a day, aren't they, and sending a batch up, and then it might have already been sold in the meantime and all the rest. But it's good to see them. I mean, that's quite a controversial one because there's a number of third-party Shopify connectors out there. So I still want to see a bit more detail. And is it free of charge, and how does it all work, and so on. The rumor is that it's been done by Shopify. Shopify initiated this rather than Microsoft. So it's you think that they're doing it from the right way round, and actually with the APIs we've got now, fairly straightforward. So interesting for those customers who want entry-level e-commerce. I think
I was going to say, and it should be quite if you want something that you can set up quickly and get going quickly. You know, we had the scenario when everyone went into lockdown that suddenly everybody needed a B2C solution, and something that you can get up and running quite quickly. It might be worth
dip your toe if it's without spending an awful lot of money to do it. So I think this is a big one. Synchronise sales quotes and orders in both directions between Business Central and Dynamics 365 sales.
I think that will raise some interesting process questions.
It will, but if you've put the order on in Business Central, why can't you see it in D365 sales? The fact that it's now going both ways is long needed. Different GL accounts for sales and purchase. So you can set up different sites and service management set up for posting group changes. So
and then you can run your suggest vendor payments by vendor posting groups. So rather than it being specific to one individual vendor, different types of invoices can have different types of vendor posting groups. So you can then do payment runs grouped together by that. So I've been trying to think of a business case for that, and an example I could give, but can't quite think why you'd want to do that without getting a bit if you've got multiple control accounts, but that I'd be interested to see how somebody uses that.
It's not often it's a restriction, is it?
Not really.
It's not one that I've come up with.
So it's obviously, but it's come about from somewhere, it's an interesting one.
Well, most of these are from the BC ideas. So somebody must have voted for it somewhere, you think, unless somebody's got extraordinary influence to get that circumvented, but I think they're
one of the application ones that I like, although they've got it under reports on the list, is the account schedule enhancement. I have long been of the belief that account schedules are massively underutilised. In fact, Matt, we're going to do a podcast on this very subject at some point, because people don't use them, I think, because they were very simplistic years ago, and on the face of it even now look quite simplistic, but with some of the enhancements they're actually really quite powerful in terms of being able to use the overview. The overview has now been extended so you can get 15 columns, which gives you at least a column for every month, plus some totaling and some variance calculations as well. With the budgeting and forecasting changes as well in the last wave, you've got some more flexibility there.
You can filter a budget on a column. So you can do budget and forecast from two different budgets.
And of course, having it on the overview on screen means you can interrogate it that way.
Drill down to the transaction.
And you can drill down to the transaction itself.
So when people export the chart of accounts into Excel and then have a convoluted, take this cell and this cell and this cell and add it together to produce the management accounting.
And potentially numbers get changed. But
you'll never beat the presentation of Excel, will you, for putting that management report together, but getting it from a account schedule rather than getting it directly from a chart.
As well, if you realise that there's some errors and you've got to go and do some corrective journals, then you've got to export it all again. Whereas at least if you look at it on the account schedules, you notice your mistakes, you go and do your corrective journals, you come back, you check it, then you produce your management pack or whatever it is that you need to do. Also, you can now print them landscape. Which might sound basic, but for most people, and especially if you want to have the kind of January to December, the multiple column layout, then I think
you can hide zero values as well to make it a bit easier to read.
And also, they don't have to say zero now. They can you can choose how it displays a zero balance basically. So there's just more flexibility, and I think it just takes them from being a very basic.
Without turning this into the Account Schedules podcast, I think it doesn't have to be for just a profit and loss and a balance sheet. Actually, your sales reporting, and the fact that on the report you can go schedule. So potentially, 8 o'clock every morning, everybody can get the sales report from the account schedule just sent out every day. You combine those two features that have come across in the last couple of years together. Don't just think it's just for management reporting. It can be for operational reporting as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So some Microsoft 365 enhancements. So Teams integration has been enhanced, more usability, I think, than functionality. Outlook add-in, I think you can add in now additional attachments in terms of emails.
So it'll capture the attachments when it captures the email,
Yeah.
Which is great.
Clever document delivery will do that as well. Yeah, it has done for a while. Development, I don't know if there's anything, James, you think we should discuss. I mean, telemetry is a big thing, I think, in 22, in the underlying information that we can get out of the system.
What we've got up till now is better than it was originally, but it's still a way off. This gives us more. This will log an error as soon as it happens. It will give you the time. It will help us, and the user. It'll help us really drill down to any areas of particularly performance issues, or where something is continually erroring or going or sporadically erroring that we can't recreate on demand. It should really help us be able to do that.
I mean, I think that there's a number of things on there that are very specialist on company open completed. They're ticking boxes that have been kind of, we can't do this because, or we're doing it in the wrong way and it's causing issues for Microsoft. So that there's a number of things there. I think the GitHub integration for development for customers that are maybe doing their own development, that's going to be really major, because ineffectively it produces the whole DevOps cycle on GitHub. It says there for partners, but I see that if partners haven't got their own source code control and DevOps in place by now, then they're probably lagging it. But end customers who are increasingly starting to be self-sufficient in terms of dev, putting it up to DevOps and then being able to share it with their partner for review. The telemetry, being able to see the company name so we can tell which company this particular error is happening it was a big miss that we need. The report data sets to XML, being able to check in XML that actually the data is actually going out to the report, whether it's showing in the report. So you've got kind of what's being reported and then how it's laid out and how it's presented. It's going to make it a little bit easier. So a lot of those, although the reporting one that I'm probably most excited about is the ability to lay out your reports in Excel.
I know.
That potentially could be a mega change to...
So you can put Excel formulas in there as well.
Well, and kind of a lot of, the word reporting's been okay, but too often you have to drop back to RDLC because you couldn't do the repeater patterns or whatever you needed in Word. It will be interesting to see actually whether Excel, because you've got more kind of precise control and placement on the page. Word wasn't ideal for that. You could spend as much time messing about to get the word layout right. I've got more higher hopes for Excel than I had for Word.
Yeah, I mean, I found on Word you ended up just creating all in a table, and you kind of end up with almost like an Excel sheet.
Yes.
So maybe.
I wonder if that's why they decided to use
and
Excel
then,
instead.
that table, as soon as you start to make a change, it all falls apart.
We all love Word, don't we? In terms of governance, administration, so kind of back-end security stuff, there's some there I think some SaaS users will like. So when you create new users, there isn't a default permission set that you can define, but you can there. So I think that would be useful.
You could have a basic user permission and assign that to a new user and just add from there.
Yep. And the other one is when you're pulling in users from Microsoft 365. I think if you've got a lot, it can take a while.
Yeah, if you've got a corporate AD that you were putting into, wait a day, come back.
Yeah, I think
tomorrow.
at 80 odd users when we did it fairly easily, look over 20 minutes.
Yeah, I've seen it.
When you're just trying to add one user.
And it's one of those where you're thinking, is this doing anything, or is it just really slow? So I think that's a good one. Is it probably a good time to talk about the security changes in terms of authentication? Because this is really significant for any customers that are on BC SaaS, but also that integrate to any Microsoft SaaS-based solutions. So if you're on an older version of NAV or BC,
you need to think about it.
But when you upgrade, but actually if today you're integrating to CRM, you're integrating to Power Platform, there may be some changes to the way that you authenticate that.
The one is SharePoint. The bigger one is SharePoint, because, for instance, Clever Dynamics have got document links that you drag and drop it on, and it can save it into SharePoint. That used to use username and password authentication. That won't work. So that will not work from April.
You'd have had some communication about this from us, and that's what we call basic authentication, isn't it? Which is username and
just
password.
Just using one of your users' username and password.
Jet. If you're using Jet, you're probably using basic authentication. If you're using sort of various third-party tools, it's probably using basic authentication. Yeah. So if you're on SaaS, you will need an update on some of your third-party apps before the BC20 upgrade can happen.
And if you're on premise, you're probably going to need an update to want some app that you use or.
Yeah. So anything where there's a web service key. I mean, it's a big long number. That functionality, you go to the user in BC, and that's where you'd copy that web service key. It's going. I mean, even if you've opened the page in the last year, it tells you that it's been deprecated. But come April, it'll stop working.
Because this is a Microsoft-wide change. Okay, if you've got Office 365 and your nav on premise is sending emails out via your Office 365 account, chances are in the earlier versions of NAV that was set up with a username and password, and that's not going to work. So
it will stop, won't it, overnight?
Apparently it will stop. I mean,
and we expect that to be at some point in April, but we don't know exactly when yet, do we?
And actually it will be different. It can be different, depending on your data center. Logically, they'll roll this out.
And the product, potentially. So it might affect BC SaaS before it affects your links to SharePoint.
I think this is I predict, in my darker hours, that this is the biggest car crash for a lot of coming. I don't think, because, there's going to be a lot of, it doesn't work, why not? We didn't realise it did that. With SaaS, one of the benefits of telemetry is that we can pull out every connection, so we can identify it, we can go through and tick it off.
Yeah,
when it's on premise, we don't have that.
If you're on SaaS and you have signed up to our managed service, then we'll be in touch in the next few weeks anyway with a plan to move anything.
And we've already, some of them we've done, the EDI ones we've done already.
Yeah, some of the third parties, like for example Continue, they're all being pushed out over the next few weeks as well, the updates needed for that. So if you're on SaaS, it's much easier because we have the ability to see exactly what data's is being authenticated using basic, so we can identify that. If you're on premise and you're on older versions, we don't necessarily know. If you've written a Power App in house and you're using it, we don't necessarily know that, and it might not be BC that needs changing. It might not be BC that needs changing, but I think if you've got any queries about the integrations you've got on whether or not they'll be affected, then you need to speak to your account manager so that we can look at it as soon as possible. Because it's already February. we know this is going to happen at some point in April, so it would be good during March that we get everybody moved over to OAuth, to the right.
And, you know,
authentication method.
Microsoft are saying this is a security issue, and typically they don't delay or compromise on security issues.
And I think that's worth saying. You know, this is being done to protect people's data because they believe that the authentication method that's in use at the moment could make people vulnerable to attack. So it's being done for the right reasons. It's been pushed back a few times. It should have happened towards the end of last year. It didn't. So I think
it was,
my gut feel is that it will happen this year.
It was a year ago in November was the first one.
I think it will happen. So we do need to address it.
But on a more positive note, Power Platform integration changes. So, you know, lots of difficult to explain, perhaps, the kind of technicalities behind this for.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess one of the big steps that's going to keep on happening is the integration with Dataverse. So Dataverse being the cloud database that kind of CRM and Power Apps and all sorts of things can connect to and use. That's going to become more and more. But it'll be used more, I think, by customers because it's going to be easier and functional and
Our customers are coming up with business cases all the time where this is just perfect. Yeah. You know, some of our customers have done some really fantastic things at, you know, relatively low cost, really, because it doesn't need a BC developer to do it.
Well, the Power Automate, you know, if you look at that, it's drag and drop workflow. It's what we've always wanted within BC, and suddenly now the connector to your BC data is so functional that actually you can use it almost like a built-in workflow.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that wasn't there was the ability to go and get a filtered set of data of all the things you could go and get one record. You can create stuff. You couldn't go and say, go and get me a list of customers where the postcode begins with, for instance. You had to, you could do that.
Today's item ledger entries.
Yeah,
you got all of your item ledger entries,
all
which might have taken a while.
All one.
Yeah, you could do that through a HTTP request into the web service, and you're probably using basic authentication on that as well. So bear in mind, that's another one to think about. Yeah. But now you can just use the normal connector, and the connector makes it so easy. You say, I want to read. You choose the customer table. It shows all the fields, and you're picking where you want to put those fields in the rest of your flow. So
if you know how BC works, you probably can do it.
Yeah. Modern clients. There's a button which is. On-prem customers would be used to open or export to Excel. On SaaS, you've got edit in Excel. In the last version, you've also got share in Teams. You've also now got a copy link option so that you can email somebody a link and it'll basically open up that page. Yeah.
And it seems like the edit in Excel is going to more pages. I've heard rumours that it's been accepted that the new price list should be able to be editable in Excel.
Good.
I don't know whether that is from May, because that's a massive.
Now you've just mentioned that, I think it's probably worth saying that the new price changes have been delayed. Yeah. So they're there, but they're not going to be properly deprecated until next year. However, for some customers, there will still be a level of preparation to do for when that functionality is bought.
It's getting your head around them.
Yeah, you need to. That's absolutely true. You know, we you need to understand how the new pricing works, and you need to understand the impact of any bespoke work that you've had around pricing on these changes.
Well, you need to check it out. I mean, I don't think it's as difficult as it perhaps first appeared. A lot of the pricing, a lot of the code that I went to check to have a look at how a price was generated actually had to make no change whatsoever. It was still going through the same functions, so it ended up in the same, going back to the new tables run the old ones. But it's where you've got kind of how you're going to set your policy up. Discounts and prices have been almost kind of smashed together, but they don't have to be. So are you going to have a separate price list for prices, net prices, and a separate price list for discounts? Or are you going to try and put the two together, which in some ways makes more logical, but it's different for every customer, because every customer's kind of pricing. Some have a retail price with discounts off, some have a net, and then a few net prices, some of them have major net prices for customers. And
well, we've kicked the can down the road now a little bit on this, but it's still important, I think, that over the next...
And any new customers should be using the new pricing from day one. If you're doing an upgrade project, that's probably the time to move over, etc.
Okay, continue on modern clients. There's a new desktop app coming out. So the app that you could get on the Microsoft Store was deprecated not that long ago, about 2021 sometime, I think.
And they brought it back.
And it's coming back. They've also introduced this web app, and I think that was 21 Wave 2, so that when you open up the web browser, a little thing pops up and you can click it and it will put a link on your desktop, and it's kind of like a browser but without the stuff around the outside. So very light kind of web app. Okay. I'm not sure whether the store one is the same thing or whether that's just slightly different.
So, I mean, I'm puzzled. Why would you use that? Why isn't it? I'm just use it in a browser and you've got multiple tabs.
Because obviously they
open 16 times like I really, really want, and kind of, the desktop app doesn't do any of that, or it just allows you one session, doesn't it? So.
Why would somebody choose to use a desktop app over the web?
I don't know.
Is it a familiarity thing? Is it a familiarity thing? Is
whether
it
it's
something
cleaner?
People just feel more comfortable with it?
The only time I could think is if you were deploying it somewhere and you didn't want the people to be able to get to Google or Netflix or whatever, you could lock it down. Is it a lockdown thing, usability from that perspective?
So you just people not have a browser and they just have the app instead? I don't know. Maybe.
It wasn't one I got.
There's 2 or 3 improvements to the web client. I think the interesting thing is they're that minor. I'm not even going to mention. I think it kind of explains how mature the web interface is. Actually,
it's over.
There's not a lot that you can add now.
It's fast.
Section onboarding. That's only really relevant for, I think, probably more partners than existing users. Reporting, we've kind of covered those, export to Excel and the account schedules. And finally, so this is the last bit, service and platform.
This is the telemetry again.
Performance telemetry, all about telemetry.
I mean, it's a point if support teams aren't using telemetry and hey, first things first, you've got to have somebody who just goes away for a week and sits up a corner and learns telemetry, because it's not something that you're just going to be able to dip into when you feel like it, I think. But,
I mean, there's
the amount of data in there is superbly useful.
I mean, there's a couple of levels though, isn't there? Because there's the telemetry you get off the admin portal, which is very basic, but there's a lot of data. It's almost, a page was opened, a button was pressed, blah 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 blah, and then there's the underlying telemetry that you can kind of get into in the back end. The back end stuff we use is very, there's a lot of data, and if you know how to interpret it, it's really good. Our ops team have created, I think they've used it from Microsoft. There was a Power BI dashboard that shows you a lot of detail about an environment and give you some useful kind of pointers, long running queries and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's getting tuned. So when that first came out, some of the things that telemetry reported on, I was kind of like, okay, useful.
Yeah, not the stuff you need.
Now it's kind of like this page has taken over 5 seconds to open.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, if that happens 5 times in a day, we want to know about it, because sooner or later that client is going to be ringing up saying, our system's slow.
We've been using this in the last few weeks for a particular issue, but still the issue is that where you've got a long running hungry process, is it the cause or is it the symptom? That's still a bit of a challenge, and I can see some of the information that's coming will help us detect whether it's cause or symptom. But I would
say in its defence, it's a lot better information than a client ringing up saying my system's slow, 100%. And you go, what's going on? Is anybody doing anything? And kind of the whole kind of trying to gut feel diagnosis that we've potentially had to do in the past.
I had a great scenario the other day, and it was related to some automation that we'd gotten into company, and you almost kind of it's a bit blind what goes over the other side of the fence really with intercompany, and I was looking at the date, so I used the inspect to see what date and time the records were created, went through telemetry, exact date and time, could see some errors being reported. Of course, the users didn't tell us that they were getting some errors, but I could see that was the error.
That's a great example, because like you say, that's but you knew what you were looking for first. yeah, it's so much better than what we could ever get before. And from a support point of view,
support's like that though. It's fixing the problem is straightforward. It's finding it is the problem, and so having the tools to help you point in the right direction and kind of sniff out that issue. That
the
really
whole
helps.
support stack. I mean, being able to look at kind of, this error occurred, go and retrieve effectively what the different background variables were and all the rest of it, and be able to see what the precise set was at that point. Mm-hmm. It's a different world. I mean, it's a different world from anything we've ever known. That the number of, I'd say probably months in my career where I've set trying to duplicate an error. Yeah. Because if you could consistently determine what caused the issue, then you could do the change to fix it. Now you've got a much, much better set. But the set, the engineering knowledge you need to be able to exploit these tools is a whole different ballgame from where it used to be. So, and a different set of skills, an application support team that understand, which way a journal goes round, whether it's a debit or a credit, and not necessarily the people who are going to query telemetry entries. So we are seeing a proliferation of kind of skill requirements across the support team that are taking some work to maximise, I think.
Yeah. And that's the list.
I think, they come out fast, don't they, these?
They do.
Just the last one, not 2 minutes ago.
But there'll be another one in 6 months' time, so,
I think, but, great. Already you're seeing, planned on going on BC ideas against some of the ideas again, and you kind of wonders. I mean, the other thing I would say is, yes, the major release BC 20 is out in April. Quite often we're seeing it's 20.1 or 20.2 or 20.3 before they're safe to do. So, certainly the 3 or 4, the 2-3 probably is fair releases after the major number change are the ones where you watch to see, right, what's gone in it. There's a lot in April 22, but there's some... there's some on there, February 22, and there's some May 22 and March 22.
They won't all necessarily
I don't think they'll all land together.
June 22.
That's where you need to.
It's probably also worth just saying that with the modern lifecycle policy, if you're an on-premise or PaaS solution and you're on maybe 2020 wave 1, wave 2, then your support your Microsoft support will cease this spring. So people who've been live 18 months a year on-premise or PaaS solutions should be thinking about getting up to the latest versions. Obviously with SaaS that's taken care of.
Or migrating to SaaS.
Thank you for lining that up for me.
Well, hey, look, I have to sit here and say that for the first couple of years of SaaS, probably until about 18 months ago, I sat through innumerable pre-sales and said, looking at the scale of this, we might need to put you on PaaS because we weren't sure about the performance of the SaaS platform. Now I think, that SaaS, the tuning at Microsoft, they've been through that tuning phase. There's not a lot wrong with performance. If you have a performance problem on SaaS, you're going to have a performance problem on PaaS. So it's code, it's the way it's been coded, the way the data's grown, that query is not optimal, there's not an index for it, which we would need to solve anyway. And actually, with the telemetry we're just talking about it, chances are we'll find what the root cause is faster on SaaS than we might do on PaaS even now. I agree. So I think it's for those who are, anybody who's past 2014 and is fully extension based.
I've got a list. It's anybody that implemented around about 2 years ago, where we were still a little bit unsure. We still kind of were.
If this had to work, we were like, okay.
Yeah, but your system is ready to migrate. They have been built ready to migrate. So I think it's time for people, if they're on BC 15, 16, 17, 18 on premise or PaaS, they should now think.
We won't name the customer, but how many users were they and what size was their database that you migrated from PaaS to the cloud? And pretty much it was one test go, one live go, wasn't it?
It's two production environments, so about 80 odd users. And
a sizable database because they went live on PaaS on 2016, I think, and so it was like 4 gig of data or something, so quite a sizable chunk of data because it's quite transactional.
And then there's a few things that you have to do. Your usernames change because you're linking it to your Office 365, so there's a little bit of migration around permissions and job queues and anything that's got a user ID. Stamped on it.
The security has to be updated.
But other than that, from a user point of view, they don't know the difference. They don't know.
They just go into a browser.
They just go into it. They went into a browser before. They just use a different link. They don't know. And then the beauty of it is these updates are just coming in every month. And then obviously with the managed service, we will make sure that any customizations are fit for the next version. And help manage that process so that you don't come in one morning and your system's updated and nothing works, which is some people's fear with the automation of the updates. But we can manage that process. We can make sure that.
I think if you think that Microsoft updates are useful, the fact that on SaaS you get ISV updates as well. Mm-hmm. So Continua, Clever. Yeah. We talked about the changes that Clever Dynamics needs to be able to talk to Office 365 from April. Yeah. Potentially we do the work once on, we deploy it to app source, next major update that comes down, that gets pushed if you don't push it quicker, which the managed service would do, and there's no drama in terms of getting that compliance. If you're on premise, you might even not realise that's there. We might not realise that's there. It stops working and you've got a disruption. So I think it's, as ISVs become more and more important to more, I would say Power Apps, doing Power Apps when you're on SaaS is just, Power Automate is just a piece of cake.
Teams integration, your Power Apps, your Power BI, all those kinds of things that...
there are now, it's not just one or two changes and it's not a lot of difference. Your users might not notice the difference, but the systems administrator and the ease at which we can deploy more benefits more quickly, I think, is significantly higher on SaaS now. Yeah. Order of magnitude higher. Mm-hmm. So I think we'll be discussing these major updates.
Yeah, if you want to talk about the process, give me a call.
That probably about wraps it up for this episode.
See you in 6 months.
Watch this space. We'll keep our eye on this list though, because Microsoft have got a habit occasionally of sneaking a few extra things into this list, or actually delivering some stuff that's not on the list at all.
I was just about to say, when we get the version and there's a few nice things in there that aren't even on the list.
Well, this list was last updated 2 days ago.
Yeah, so we might need another update, haven't we?
So don't think this is it, guys. You might get some more on top of this. But thank you for listening, and look forward to joining you next time. Thank you.